Welcome to A2Council Update, a recap of the Ann Arbor City Council meeting on June 5th, 2023. My name is Elizabeth Nelson, and I served on Ann Arbor City Council from 2018 to 2022. I understand the inner workings of our local government, and I believe that you should too. This is the voting chart for the council meeting on June 5th, 2023. There was a single vote of dissent. You can find this voting chart and more information about this meeting at A2Council.com. The meeting included a monthly report from the Independent Community Police Oversight Commission, or ICPOC. Chair Stephanie Carter shared information about a study conducted by Eastern Michigan University called Southeast Michigan Justice Policy Research Project, or SMART.
What I'd like to let you know is that the analysis identified significant disparities across every dimension that they examined, with non-white motorists being stopped and searched more frequently across every dimension examined, and white motorists being stopped and searched less frequently than would be expected in every instance. I'm aware of certain things that will be coming before this council, and I hope that you will consider this report when you look at things that I know are coming.
After introductory remarks, public comments, and staff explanations, Council discussed agenda items for approximately 1 hour. 15 people signed up in advance to offer public comments. 10 people spoke on topics that were part of the agenda. The consent agenda included 23 items and over $22 million in expenditures. 2 items were pulled for discussion, CA-12 and CA-21. Council considered CA-12, a construction contract for water main and resurfacing work at Pontiac, Swift, Moore, and Wright. In advance of the meeting, it was revealed that the bid proposal for this contract included information that was different from what had been submitted just weeks before. Bailey Excavating submitted a new Experience Modification Rating, or EMR, for a time period that ended a year ago. EMR scores are used by city staff to measure worker safety when evaluating bid proposals on city contracts. Preference is given for scores of 1 or below. In discussion of the contract, Councilmember Iyer reacted to this information and attempted to explain EMR.
It should be noted that this system is based on self-reporting, and it is sometimes the case that the contractor's higher EMR reflects a willingness to report claims rather than actually having an unsafe working environment, and vice versa.
An EMR score is not, in fact, based on self-reporting or a contractor's willingness to report. Michigan law requires that insurance carriers report worker compensation payments. Insurance carriers report this information directly to the Compensation Advisory Organization of Michigan, which then calculates an EMR score. Councilmember Iyer continued.
When I noticed the change, I checked it out, and I found a perfectly reasonable explanation. The contractor had an outstanding workers' comp claim for that particular calendar year that was recently closed, and they were found to not be at fault. Therefore, their EMR for that year has now decreased.
This statement also is confused. Workers' compensation is a form of no-fault insurance. Claims are paid for injuries without proof of fault. An EMR higher than 1 reflects the fact that a workers' compensation claim was paid by an insurance carrier. This is not the first time that Councilmember Iyer has attempted to evaluate construction bid proposals. Last year, Iyer persuaded colleagues to reject a staff-recommended contract so that it could be awarded to Bailey Excavating. At the council table, she claimed,
"You know, the OSHA violations, anyone can look them up. This particular contractor had twice as many as the next lowest bidder."
This was not true. MLive researched and reported the facts. Bailey Excavating had simply failed to disclose any OSHA violations. Council unanimously approved the contract with Bailey Excavating for water main replacement and resurfacing at Pontiac, Swift, Moore, and Wright. Council then considered a contract with University of Michigan and Poverty Solutions to administer a universal basic income program. $1.6 million in federal American Rescue Plan Act funds have been allocated to this program. It will provide monthly payments of approximately $528 to 100 families for 2 years. Staff and representatives from Poverty Solutions answered questions for approximately 40 minutes.
The number 1 criteria is low and moderate income households. There will be an amendment offered tonight that requires those households to be City of Ann Arbor residents, members of those households to be City of Ann Arbor residents. But that's the top line criteria. There's not a whole lot of detail other than that.
You know, we plan to cast a wide net, and we ourselves, plan to do a lot of just, feet on the ground and going to events. We selected to name Friends Indeed as our community partner because of, just their, all the work that they do with their Circles program in this area. The Circles program really does have, as its model, the goal of helping folks who are lower income start their own businesses, and that really does resonate with what we're proposing. And we're in the process of submitting an application for a waiver to make sure that SNAP, Medicaid, TANF, and a couple other benefit programs, that the guaranteed income payment won't count toward their eligibility for those programs. And we're starting conversations to make sure that would also be the case with any housing assistance folks would get.
The agreement with Poverty Solutions was approved unanimously, including a friendly amendment that all participants be Ann Arbor residents. Council unanimously approved first reading of an ordinance amendment that will allow impounded bicycles to be donated to a local nonprofit. At a future meeting, the ordinance amendment will be subject to a public hearing and final approval at second reading. Council then considered repeal of an ordinance that requires landlords to provide voter information to tenants. After a brief introduction, it was approved at first reading without discussion. Mayor Pro Tem Redina voted against the change, but made no comment. At a future meeting, this repeal will be subject to a public hearing and final approval at second reading. Council then considered an ordinance that will prohibit the sale of bred dogs, cats, ferrets, rabbits, long-lived birds, and large reptiles in pet stores. Earlier in the evening, one public commenter spoke in support of the ordinance.
6 states and over 460 localities have prohibited the sale of dogs and cats in pet stores, including East Point, Fraser, New Baltimore, Royal Oak, Harbor Springs, St. Clair Shores, and newly Woodhaven here in Michigan. These laws have shrunk demand for puppies bred in cruel conditions, with public records showing 32,000 fewer breeding dogs in USDA-licensed puppy mills than 10 years ago.
In explaining the ordinance, Councilmember Ackman acknowledged,
there's currently no stores selling pets in Ann Arbor. So what this ordinance really does is ensure that no pet store is ever does this practice in the future.
The ordinance was approved unanimously at first reading. At a future meeting, it will be subject to a public hearing and final approval at second reading. Council then considered a resolution directing city staff to prioritize the rezoning of Plymouth and Washtenaw as quickly as possible. Earlier in the evening, public commenters spoke to the issue.
This resolution seems urgent, vague, and perhaps misleading. It sends a message that seems to say we need to pass this before the comprehensive plan gets going and the public have a chance to alter it.
The resolution says that the TC1 set of rules must be applied, and it goes further than that. It says we must rezone hundreds of parcels to TC1 as a priority prior to making any modifications to TC1. If TC1 doesn't fit the new corridors well, or if we find other fixes are needed to TC1 as we learn more how applicants with properties in the first 2 iterations are dealing with it.
30
we
seconds.
are to ignore all of that.
My opinion is that this action is long overdue, and that any further modification or revisions to TC1 zoning can take place later.
And I just would implore the city to please move forward as quickly as possible with changes that would allow more families to enjoy these amenities that my family has enjoyed, to build more housing along Plymouth Road where there's already access to these great amenities and transportation.
And I want to say, let's get moving on the TC1 rezoning of Plymouth and Washtenaw now.
Council made statements in support of the resolution for about 10 minutes.
The question is TC1 better than the current zoning? And the answer is yes.
I can't have constituents protest every single project that comes along these corridors when we've been talking about rezoning for quite some time.
And it's in alignment with our climate action and our transportation goals for the city. And it'll just overall make the area more accessible. So
this isn't something that the community hasn't engaged in. In fact, we're actually delivering on campaign promises that we made to the community.
While the TC1 Plymouth area and the TC1 Washtenaw area, there's been suggestions of those maps in staff engagement presentations, staff community engagement presentations that occurred in the past couple years. Those maps have not been finalized. I myself, my fellow representatives, we will be hearing from constituents about specific parcels, about specific features.
The resolution was approved unanimously. Council then considered a resolution to dissolve the Council of the Commons. The Council of the Commons was established by resolution in 2019 and tasked with public engagement for development of the center of the city. It has met since 2021. This advisory group was formed in response to a city charter amendment approved by voters in November 2018. That charter amendment directed the development of an urban park and civic center on the city-owned parcel at Fifth Avenue. Councilmember Cornell introduced the resolution to dissolve the Council of the Commons. Prior to her election to City Council, Cornell served as a member of the Council of the Commons. She has publicly stated her opposition to the results of the voter referendum.
So it is appropriate to disband that group and to refer these activities as indicated to the Parks Advisory Committee, which is, it is part of a park. It is designated as a park, and that is the appropriate use for that committee's time.
But I do just want to make one quick statement with respect to what the land, how the land is designated internally within the city. The park of the area is only Liberty Plaza. Liberty Plaza is a park. The balance of the property is not park.
Council unanimously approved the resolution dissolving the Council of the Commons. Council then considered changes to meeting rules that restrict and regulate public comment in council meetings. In November 2022, a majority of an outgoing city council eliminated open public comment from the end of meetings. Since the change, no public comment has occurred at the end of and in response to a council meeting.
And so this is just a minor change that prioritizes those speaking categories so that if you are speaking to an item that's on the agenda, you do get prioritized in front of folks who have a general comment to make.
Council unanimously approved the rules change that will add an hour for pre-registration of comments and prioritize certain public comments over others based on topic. Council unanimously approved a resolution authorizing the city attorney to initiate and pursue litigation or other legal action on behalf of the city using their best professional judgment. Council then considered a resolution regarding use of revenue from the affordable housing millage. The resolution directs the city administrator to evaluate using millage proceeds for bond financing and report back to council by December 2023. Executive Director of the city's Housing Commission explained how bonding might accelerate investment in affordable housing.
We may end up having only one path that we can take if we also are utilizing what's called 9% low-income housing tax credits, and that potential path might only allow us to work directly with the City of Ann Arbor with their bond authority.
Council offered statements of support before approving the resolution unanimously. Council then considered a resolution asking the city administrator to identify incentives to support voluntary efforts by residents and businesses to reduce carbon emissions through sustainable heating and electrification.
There may be ways that we can save developers and residents time and money, or because time is money.
The resolution was approved unanimously. Finally, Council considered a Memorandum of Understanding with the Economic Development Corporation. Earlier in the meeting, members of the EDC offered public comment.
This MOU will allow for the EDC to work closely with the city administrator to determine other activities and services that the EDC will provide.
The EDC is a way for an eligible applicant, for an eligible project to save substantial sums on their financing costs. So it's benefited many projects in the city over the years.
Council unanimously approved the Memorandum of Understanding. City Council went into closed session for nearly an hour to discuss the purchase or lease of real property, litigation, and confidential memos provided on May 30th and June 1st. The meeting adjourned before 11:15 with no additional public comment. For more details about this meeting, visit A2Council.com.
Welcome to this week's A2Council Moment of Zen. Since November 2022, City Council has voted unanimously over 98% of the time. Watch a moment of dissent.
Discussion, please, of C2.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize no one else would speak for this. Okay. This is a very simple repeal, of a provision of the building code that requires landlords to provide voter registration information. It has gotten some, I believe, some legal challenges elsewhere. And besides, it's just done better through many other avenues. So we don't need this.
Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? I'll note Councilmember Adina is in opposition. Further, but it passes. 10 council members, 11 council members, 10 voting in the affirmative. Councilmember Adina in opposition.